Hello and welcome to the Cognate. My name is Sheikh Zakeer Hussain. Over the past few months, tens of companies, investment companies across India, all operating under the pretext of being Sharia compliant, have either shut down operations or have stopped paying investors their money. These companies systematically targeted Muslim community in Bangalore, Hyderabad, Mumbai, and other cities, and even targeted Muslims living abroad. They are believed to have defrauded investors to the tune of hundreds of crores. So, what were these businesses? What were the business model? Were they really Sharia compliant as they claim to be? And will the investors get the money back? To answer this question and more, we have today with us Mr. Saif Ahmed. Saif Ahmed is a prominent Islamic banking and financial expert in India. He's a graduate of the London School of Economics and also a graduate in economics from Bates College, USA. Saif has worked as an investment banker in Wall Street for the likes of Merrill Lynch and JP Morgan, both in London and New York. He's also worked in several Islamic banks in the Middle East. Saif is presently involved in developing Islamic finance and investment products in India to the Indian market. And he's also the founder of Zad Chit Fund Private Company, which is India's first Sharia compliant registered chit fund company. And he's also the founder of Zamzam Capital, which is a Sharia compliant wealth management firm. Welcome to the program, Saif.
Thank you, Zakeer, for having me over.
Thank you.
And for organizing this interview.
Thank you so much. Saif, first question. These companies have been operating for almost 2 years or more than 2 years in Bangalore and other cities across India. Bangalore, as we know, has a vibrant Muslim community. We have scholars, Islamic scholars, financial experts, Muslim politicians. We also have intellectuals, activists, journalists, and even large number of Urdu newspapers. Despite having such a community, these companies still manage to defraud so many people, all under the name of Sharia and Islamic finance. What do you think went wrong? How come the community did not recognize them, or how come the community did not stop them? Is there any reasonable explanation as to what went wrong?
That's a very good question, Zakeer. I think there is no one answer or straight answer to this. I think it's a complex set of answers, complex set of factors all put together led to this debacle or fiasco. I think, but if you were to come to the root of it, I think the single biggest cause would be lack of knowledge, lack of financial knowledge, both in terms of conventional finance, conventional investments, about from all aspects of the community, whether they are intellectuals or professionals. At the same time from the scholars. So lack of conventional knowledge about conventional finance and also about Islamic finance.
Sure.
Because Islamic finance and investments at the end of the day is pretty much the same as conventional finance with a set of Islamic principles that come from the Sharia built on top of it to decide what is permissible and what is not.
Sure.
And but the bulk of it is pretty similar. So a Ponzi scheme, as many of these companies were, has the same features whether it calls itself halal or not halal. So yeah, the biggest thing that these companies did was to call themselves halal.
Yes.
And that whole process itself was not done the right way. So there was a lack of a community watchdog to pronounce these companies, to even evaluate them. It's a complete systemic failure, but I think the community will come out stronger from it. A lot of questions are now being asked, people are wiser from it, but unfortunately a lot of damage has been done. A lot of people have lost their life earnings. Very sad stories. So yeah, that's unfortunate. So there's no one answer. People were lacking in terms of knowing the legal aspects to see whether these companies were legal or not. And there are various things to look into that. But if you leave that aside, even from the pure Sharia perspective, just by asking a few simple questions to these companies or to the promoters, one could easily ascertain whether they are halal or not.
Okay. So coming to the question of halal or not, what exactly is an Islamic investment company? Because all these companies, whether they were actually halal or not, they claim to be Islamic compliant, Sharia compliant. And how do you define an Islamic company?
So Zakeer, as you know, globally Islamic banking and finance is a global phenomenon. In over 70 countries, 70 plus countries, you have Islamic financial institutions. Be they banks or investment companies, etc., NBFCs, you have the Islamic versions of them, even in countries like the USA, in many countries in Europe, Africa, Russia. So Islamic finance, even in Australia, you have Islamic home finance available, for instance. So it's spread globally. But what you find in all markets, even the developed Islamic finance markets like the Middle East countries, Malaysia, Indonesia, is that every Islamic financial institution has a Sharia board.
Sure.
A Sharia board is a separate body, like the board of directors, that certifies whether that company is, following the Sharia in all its operations. All the products are as per the Sharia requirements. So this board is made up of competent and renowned ulama from that
Particular
country or that
Sure.
jurisdiction. So you'll find that none of these companies pretty much had any Sharia board.
Yes.
And their halal claim, the claim to being halal was in many cases just writing the word halal, fooling people by saying that this is profits.
Sure.
And some of them even said that we've got fatwas. But you see, a fatwa is just an answer to a question offered by a mufti.
Sure.
So whatever you ask, you get an answer. And the madrasas in India are not in the job of certifying whether a company is Sharia compliant or not, because that is not their job.
Okay.
They will answer any question that's asked to them. So if somebody were to say, can we buy and sell, for instance, gold and silver, and do a business out of it, they'll say, yeah, sure, you can, as long as it follows the rules of Sharia.
Sure.
And if you're doing that, you'll be halal. So you need a separate Sharia board that is made up of competent scholars that will audit you completely every year or every quarter. Will go through all your financial statements, will go through your operations, your processes, and map that to Sharia, their Islamic finance rules and principles that are well known, and then determine whether it's halal or not. So that's the first step. But there are various principles now. For instance, for a company to be halal, for the investment to be halal, you've got to make sure that you also share in the risk of loss.
Sure.
Right? You've also got to make sure that your profits are not predetermined or fixed. What you found here is that people were pretty much getting the same profit or high rate of profit. Is that profit reasonable, etc. So, if you want, I could talk about these.
Sure, I did have a question, because most of these companies promise high returns. Some of these companies even promise to double the income that was invested. So, what is the Islamic viewpoint on this? Is it Islamically valid? Can a company promise to give a fixed amount of percentage or fixed amount of income every month?
Right. So, riba, which is forbidden in Sharia, which is interest, usually interest, which everybody knows, the Quran explicitly prohibits riba, is giving a fixed rate of return, where the lender doesn't share any risk from his investment or from his financing. There are various principles in Sharia. For instance, there's a principle called al-kharaj bil zaman, which means that to get a return from an asset or an investment, you should also share in its liability. That if there is any loss, you should be sharing in that, or you should be liable for that loss. Then only you could get a return for it. And there's also
there's no concept of a sleeping partner in Islam?
There is. A sleeping partner is fine. A sleeping partner in a partnership where you have a working partner and one or two sleeping partners. A sleeping partner can invest in the capital of a business and share in the profits as per a predetermined ratio, profit sharing ratio, where a sleeping partner cannot get a higher ratio than the ratio of his capital contribution. So if he's contributed 20% to the capital of the company, he can't get more than 20% share of the profits. The working partner will get more than his share of investment because he's also contributing to managing the business. Right? But what I'm trying to say is getting a fixed return without taking any risk is akin to riba. So whether you call it profit or whatnot, many of these companies, you would find that every month they were giving you a profit, and a very high profit, right? Some are giving 3%, some are giving 8, 10, which is, if you analyze it, you're looking at 30% plus, even up to 100%, which is just not feasible. Anybody who's a student of finance would know that, the safest investment from a conventional perspective is putting your money in a bank, in a fixed deposit, or buying a government security. That gives you right now around 7 to 8, 9% per annum, right? Sort of risk-free interest that you get. But then as you move up the curve, the higher the risk you take, the higher the return. And that's also a Sharia principle. It's known as al-ghunam bil-ghurm,
Okay.
which means that it's a risk-reward trade-off. The more the risk you take, the higher the reward you can get.
Sure.
So Sharia recognizes that, which is what conventional finance teaches us.
Okay.
But Sharia is recognizing that even much earlier. So the most riskiest investment, generally is putting your money in the stock market.
Yes.
Right. Now the Sharia rules for investing in the stock market, which is a separate subject. Ulama have come up with certain screening criteria to look at companies to decide whether they are halal or not. It's not just looking at the business of the company. Yes, companies that are into alcohol and tobacco and other forbidden sectors, even banks, because they deal in interest, are excluded. But after that, you've got to look at financial ratios. So that's a separate topic by itself. It's not just so when you invest in these companies, you've got to look at various factors. So as I was saying, the stock market, the returns, if you're lucky, if you're considered a good investor who beats the market. Let's take the case of Warren Buffett. He's a legendary investor who's made billions of dollars, and he's been investing since a very long time, right? His compounded annual growth rate on average over all these years is just around 20 to 22% in that ballpark.
Okay.
Right? So you don't have to really earn a lot. So if you earn around 20%, 20 to 25%, it's considered a very good return on average from the stock market. Whereas, you can lose your entire capital in a particular year.
Some of these companies were offering 36,
36, I think that's the bare minimum. They were offering much more than that, and that's sitting at home people are getting. So it's leaving aside the financial aspect also, because any financial expert will be able to say that this is a Ponzi scheme based on the returns they're offering and the fact that they're not disclosing their financial statements, etc., etc. I would like to really talk about the Sharia aspect, because here we're talking about the Muslim community, we're talking about Islam. Muslims are concerned about halal and haram. If you ask any Muslim, even if he's not praying regularly, for instance, eat some haram food. This is Nauzubillah, something which is haram. He's not going to eat it, right? Sure. So the same way, they need to be concerned about their investment being halal. Sure. A Ponzi scheme, the returns you get from a Ponzi scheme is not halal. This is a general consensus of the ulama, because a Ponzi scheme is based on deception. Sure. The returns are fictitious. What they are disclosing and what they are giving as returns, because the nature of a Ponzi scheme is to give the returns to the investors, so that more investors keep coming, as you know. Sure. So that keeps building up, and one fine day they pull the plug and the pack of cards fall down and they run away. So those returns themselves are fictitious. They're based on deception and lies. Sure. So it's akin to riba. So the returns that people have got, it's like putting haram food in your stomach.
Are you telling that everyone who has got any kind of returns from these companies, it's not halal?
Well, if the company is proved as being a Ponzi scheme and has given fictitious returns, and people have realized that now, I mean, they can go and ask a mufti that they are familiar with. Pretty much the answer would be the same, that the fact that you got returns. I mean, what the answer would be is, supposing somebody had invested 1 lakh. And he had got returns of say 1,50,000 up till now, profits. Sure. And his 1 lakh is lost. So up to what you've invested is fine for you to keep. Anything extra, since it was not halal, there are ways to clean it. So you have to talk to your mufti, and probably the answer is going to be you've got to clean that. Right?
We'll come to the mufti part a little later. We'll talk more about the Ponzi scheme. Most of these companies, I mean, we know now that these were Ponzi schemes. So can we address a little bit about how does the business model actually works? I mean, how are they able to give the returns for you? These companies, of course, they were there for a couple of months, but they have been Ponzi schemes which ran for a couple of years, almost 20 to 30 years. But at the end of the day, that's when people realize those were Ponzi schemes. So how do these companies manage to return that kind of money?
I mean, a Ponzi scheme is a well-researched subject. Globally, it's a global phenomenon. You've got Ponzi schemes in the US, in the UK. You've heard of Bernie Madoff, right? He ran a Ponzi scheme for many years, and many millionaires got fooled. Expert investors also put money with him, and he was on Wall Street and he defrauded, millions and millions, and so it's not a unique to Bangalore or to our community. It's happened from times immemorial. It started with the tulip, the tulip Ponzi scheme back, I think, 300, 400 years ago in the Netherlands. But the unique thing about this whole episode the last few years is that the word halal was used to use the religious persuasion to draw the Muslim community. Because I don't think if the halal aspect was used, you would have got so much participation. Because many people, especially from the downtrodden classes, saw the ulama also putting money, saw the respectable people putting money, and they came and said, this is a great way, this is halal income that I'm getting. Right? So the Ponzi scheme is very simple. The operation is very simple. You give a high then average return to the first set of investors, and they each one goes out and gets another 10 people, and that chain goes on. Right? There's no actual business. The oxygen for it is new money. As long as more money comes in, new investments come in, you could offer a return to the set of investors. There's no actual business. For show, you show a few things. A Ponzi scheme will never disclose the amount of money they have raised. They would never disclose their actual balance sheet or income statement or what they're actually doing. So it's a whole deception. And ultimately, it's like a pack of cards that you build a house with a pack of cards. And if you just, or matchsticks, if you just, when it falls, it all fall down.
Yes. But do you think the intention was always to,
defraud
people, or did they start off with a good intention?
I think in some cases, in some of these firms, you've clearly seen that the intention was to defraud the people who have run away and the earliest opportunity. But in some cases, it could even be pure mismanagement or lack of professionalism, which is an equal crime. Because if you don't have an expertise to run an investment company, you don't come from a financial background, you never worked in a bank, or you don't know anything about Islamic finance or finance for that matter, and you're taking money from the public. It's hard-earned money from people, and you just say, for instance, putting everything in real estate, which is an illiquid asset. And real estate prices, it can go up, it goes up, but once it stagnates, it's a long cycle. 5 to 10 years, your money is stuck till the market moves up again. And so you're taking people short-term investments who put money for 4 months or 6 months or 1 year, they probably need the money, and you've invested it in real estate. So that's completely unprofessional. So in those cases also, I think there are some companies who have stuck and say we've got land banks and this and that. But that is totally unprofessional on your part to take money from people, auto drivers, housewives, you name it, teachers, etc., and invest in an illiquid asset. And when they want the money, you say, look, the prices are depressed, you can't take it out, and you leave them,
And some of these companies, like we were talking, they didn't even have the competency. The people who started these companies, they were not financial experts. That's what it's been revealed now. They didn't even have, some of them didn't even have a background in business. Some of them were doctors, some of them were, used to run real estate agencies. And all of a sudden, they just come on scene and they start off these companies.
It was just like, let's make hay while the sun shines. Unfortunately, the public should have also done their due diligence, research, and found out. But I think it's a combination of ignorance, greed, and whatnot. It's a potpourri of reasons and led to this mess.
So we were talking about the muftis and ulama. Checking with muftis and ulamas. What we have known now is many of these marketing agents for these companies were muftis and ulamas. Some of them were quite high ranking. We obviously will not name the names, but that's what's been revealed. They were involved in the marketing of these companies. So if the ulama, if these were not halal things, how did the ulama get involved? How did they give sanctions to invest money in these companies?
Well, I have great respect for the ulama in our country, especially ulama in India, well known globally for their knowledge, well respected, alhamdulillah. But in the field of Islamic banking and finance, it is safe to say that the ulama in India themselves acknowledge from top madrasas in the country that we are a bit deficient in the practical aspects of modern business and finance and commerce, and even the modern Islamic banking industry. It's a recent phenomenon. It's only from the 70s and 80s that you've had Islamic banks come up in the Middle East and Malaysia and then spread out. So ulama from India have not been at the forefront, and a lot of it is because we don't have Islamic banks in India because of government regulation and whatnot. So the ulama who've graduated from madrasas and who are are not able to actually get practical knowledge. So that, and also the fact that to understand business and finance, English is sort of required as a knowledge, and you've got to read about business and understand. So I won't say there are none, but there are very few. There are very few ulama in the country but the numbers are growing, alhamdulillah. Young ulama are starting to read about business and finance, educate themselves about the stock market, about how markets work, what is economics, how the whole system works. But from the classical point of view, the Sharia maxims, the fiqh, the jurisprudence for, as you know, in jurisprudence, in fiqh, a large part is muamalat, transactions. So the knowledge of transactions, most of it is business, right? That the ulama, they've studied that in their madrasas while they are getting educated, and that they have fantastic knowledge. All right, it's a question of just applying those to modern business and finance.
But it's between the theoretical and the application.
But I think it's easy. They would have to just read. There's a great scholar, Mufti Taqi Usmani Sahib, who's well respected globally. He's written a lot of books for ulama themselves to understand. I think more and more I find young ulama, especially, are reading and coming up to grips. And I think this particular episode, this whole Ponzi episode, has awakened everybody now in the country. And inshallah, I hope. Rather than these,
I might have to differ a little bit on that, because there are still companies which claim to be Sharia compliant, which claim to be halal, which claim to be certified by ulamas, still operational. They're still providing the same kind of high returns rate, and the response from the intellectuals or the ulama or from the community is still the same. They're still investing in these companies. And
I agree with you. It's they are, but I think now, given that quite a few companies have closed down and people are protesting on the streets literally, and even the government has woken up. We are here in Bangalore, so the Karnataka government recently, I saw a circular where they asked all the districts to enforce the KPID Act, which is the Karnataka Protection of Interest of Depositors in Financial Establishments, which is an act that regulates all companies that are not that are collecting deposits without the permission of RBI. And if there are complaints against them, this act is enforced, and the government has full powers to seize the assets of the company and even its promoters. So even the government is woken up, the police is woken up, and I think very soon, whatever these companies are that you're mentioning, will be asked very tough questions, and they have to come clear. I think the number one thing they have to do is disclose the assets under management. Because that's the first thing you would do. Any investment company, a mutual fund is an investment scheme, right? Always discloses its assets under management, AUM. So that's the total funds we have from the public that we are managing, right? So they need to disclose that this is the amount of money we've collected from the public, and that has to be audited by a competent chartered accountant. Besides having a Sharia board that will certify that their products and their processes are Sharia compliant, as I mentioned earlier. So that's the first thing they would have to do. And then they'd have to disclose their financial statements in a transparent manner, because if you've collected X amount from the public, and what is the amount you've also invested, so we need to see where that's deployed, and that will come through in the financial statements.
Sorry to cut you down. Islamically, is it required for the company to put up all the information? In this day and age, to put it up on a website, which is accessible for people? How does it work?
Yeah, one should be public with this. This is not confidential information. Nobody's asking you to share the list of investors. Nobody's asking you to share your business secrets. What we're asking you is, like, I'm just giving the example of a mutual fund. You go to any website, you can see all the mutual funds. I'm just using one investment vehicle here, which they disclose the amount they've collected and where they've invested in these companies. So if you're a company, you've taken so many, say, crores from the public, you've put so many crores yourself, that's certified by a chartered accountant, okay, and this money is being deployed in these ventures.
Sure.
So, and these are the financial statements for all the ventures.
Mm-hmm.
We put 2 and 2 together. Islam promotes transparency.
Yes.
If you're not transparent, see, one of the things that is, the various Sharia criteria, the 4 main criteria is that riba is haram.
Yes.
The other thing is gharar, excessive uncertainty.
Okay.
Anything that is uncertain, right?
Yes.
You shouldn't. It makes an investment haram.
Okay.
Okay. For instance, if I am trying to sell you fish in the pond,
Mm-hmm.
that's an uncertain transaction because you're not sure. I'm not sure whether I can catch that
hold
fish.
of the fish.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm selling you 2 birds on a tree, for
Yes.
instance. The other thing is maisir, which is gambling.
Mm-hmm.
So gambling, as we know, is haram.
Sure.
Anything that has gambling in it, right? And the other thing is the ethical nature. The
Sure.
business should be in an ethical business. So transparency, there should be no uncertainty.
Sure.
You should be very transparent to what amount of money you've collected and how you've deployed that. And talking about Islamic investments, there are basically 2 ways for these companies to take money from the public,
Mm-hmm.
right? That are allowed in the Sharia. So I'll just talk a bit about that.
Sure.
One of it is, so if I'm an investment company and you're the investor and I'm taking the money from you, one is I should have a proper contract with you.
Not the receipt that these companies
not
get.
the receipt or just a MOU that,
Yeah.
I've just seen so many examples. These are not Sharia compliant contracts.
Okay.
The very first thing is that either I should take the money from you in the capacity of a mudarib, I'll explain
Sure.
that, or a wakil.
Okay.
So there are 2 contracts. One is a mudaraba contract and the other is a wakala contract.
Okay.
Okay, a mudaraba is a partnership contract
Sure.
where you're investing and I'm managing your money, right? We're both forming a partnership, whereas you're the financier. You're known as the Rabbul Mal,
Okay.
the owner of the money, and I'm the mudarib. I'm the entrepreneur.
Okay.
So we have a profit sharing ratio between us.
Okay.
For example, you take 60% of the profits, I take 40% of the profits,
Sure.
and if the business suffers a loss, you lose your investment.
Everyone is equally liable for it.
Yeah, you're liable for the investment because
Sure.
you're the owner of the capital and I've lost my effort.
Sure.
Unless, of course, I've fraudulently
Okay.
wasted the money, then I'm liable for
Sure,
that.
sure.
But that's a mudaraba. So either I take it in a mudaraba contract where the profit sharing ratio is mentioned
Sure.
between us,
Yes.
okay? Or I could take it in a wakala contract, which is an agency. I'm a wakil, I'm an agent of yours.
Okay.
You've invested, say, 5 lakh rupees with me. I'm your agent. You give me a commission
Okay.
on an annual basis, all right?
Okay.
You take me 2% of that, 3% of that. So that's my fees, and I'm going to be managing your money and by investing it in various XYZ ventures, which I've told you.
That's exactly what these companies claim to be. I mean, they're managing the wealth, right?
But
What's the
I
difference?
don't see any of these terms in their contracts,
Okay.
or even if they're not mentioned in the Arabic word, they should either mention a profit sharing ratio,
Sure.
or they should mention a commission they are taking from the investors.
Okay.
But none of the agreements, what I've seen, show that. So that first shows that they don't have a Sharia board and they don't know much about Islamic finance. And unfortunately, the investors also are not aware.
Yes.
So the contracts are fasid, they're batil, because Islam is a lot about contracts.
Is it batil only because the specific Islamic terms were not used, or
So I could do a completely Sharia compliant contract without using terms like wakala and mudaraba. If I just say agent, it's fine. Sharia looks at intention and the substance.
Exactly.
And even the form, just not using an Arabic word does not make it Sharia compliant or not. But for instance, nikah. What is nikah? It's a contract.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
The nikah has a certain format, a certain prescribed way of it being executed. There's an offer and acceptance. There are witnesses, and a nikah is done. That's the key part. So in these contracts, you got to fulfill these things. Like in a mudaraba, a profit sharing ratio should be mentioned, and in a wakala, the fees you're offering the wakil, the investment company should be mentioned. So these are some of the basic things that should be there, and the very fact that it is not there shows a complete lack of knowledge, ignorance on the part of both parties. I would have to blame the investors also for this.
Sure.
And now when when there's a lot of problem, these companies are closing down, their promoters are saying, look, we made a loss. But they never mentioned that earlier. They were giving high profits and investors thought they're only going to be getting profits.
Sure.
So it's complete breakdown in the whole understanding of people lot of factors, as I mentioned. I think greed was a key factor in all of this.
Islamically, how do we look at the situation? Because the investors were not educated. The greed we do not know, because that's something inside. But they were not educated enough. They didn't understand what they were going into. So are they? Is their demand to get their money back? Is it legitimate Islamically? Are the companies liable to give the money back now that they've made losses? If these guys get the money back, is it halal for them to have that money back?
So yeah, I think as I mentioned earlier, the very fact that these were proven to be Ponzi schemes and deceptive companies, the least that these promoters could do is return the money to the public. But a Ponzi scheme that hardly happens because they've siphoned off the money, they've filtered it away.
Sure.
But yeah, from an investor's perspective, if I say put 1 lakh rupees, and the way I would look at it and what I understand, but everybody should please check with the. I'm not a alim or a mufti. Always check whatever I'm saying with corroborated with a scholar. Is that if you have put 1 lakh rupees in that company, and for the last 3 years I've been getting a return, and so far when I calculate I've got 1,25,000 rupees. Right, and my principal of 1 lakh is stuck. Sure. So I should basically, if you ask me, the 1 lakh since it was not halal to begin with. 1 lakh, you've got 1,25,000. The balance 25,000, just give it in charity without any reward. I think that's if you ask for my opinion and what I've learned from scholars, it's that.
Yeah, so it's halal to claim the principal amount, but just let it go the other way.
If it's proven that it's a Ponzi scheme and you realize now in hindsight that this company was just deceiving people, there was no real business. So what you've earned, you make tawbah that was haram income and you try to clean it off.
Sure, that is Islamically, but unfortunately, the people who have invested money, many of them have actually sold off their houses.
So yeah, that's how a Ponzi scheme works, right? Somebody puts 1 lakh and they get a good return for 4 months or 8 months, and then they put 2 lakhs. And then, beyond their means, they invest, they borrow money, they even sell their house, and they put 10 lakhs. People who could invest 10 lakhs put 1 crore. That's the greed factor coming in. So most of the people have actually lost and they got stuck when they went and put everything in it. So yeah, I feel for them. People are going through hard times. I hope the law and order machinery that's there kicks in and people are able to recover as much as they can by
Do you think it's possible because what we have seen in the news for past couple of months? The Cognate has been following up this news very closely. Most of these companies have lost the money. There is no way that some of them, at least, there is no way that they can return back the money.
Yeah,
the losses happen.
Going by experience, Ponzi schemes, as I said, have been there for forever. In India itself, you've had names like City Limousine, the Sarda scam. Agri Gold, etc. But if you look at experience, investors are lucky if they get 20, 30, 40, 50% of what their, recovery happens, and these things can stretch for a long time in the courts, etc. That's just the way the system works. It's very unfortunate, as I say.
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we are talking about is a regulatory body, having a Sharia board, having a regulatory body. Is there any such boards in India? Is there any regulator who has the competency or has the authority to certify, regulate, and then monitor these companies? Or if
there is a Sharia perspective?
From a Sharia perspective, is there any kind of a regulatory body in place in India?
Specifically for Islamic finance and investments, there isn't.
There isn't.
Which I think is a good thing for the scholars to consider.
Okay.
You have the All India Muslim Personal Law Board that looks at personal law matters, but it doesn't come into the domain of business and finance. And as I said, there are very few competent ulama who actually understand the subject, but that body is growing. From what I know, it is growing. So it's not too difficult to have a board at the national level, but I think what's more important is to have them at the regional level. So have one in Bangalore, have one in Chennai, have one in Mumbai, different parts of the country where the scholars from that area themselves, because scholars have the knowledge.
Yes.
They know the Sharia better than anybody else, and they can work with professionals. And come up with a good watchdog, a body that can regulate the whole thing. Talking about Bangalore specifically, of late, I'm aware of a movement effort by the top scholars ulama in the city
Okay.
to put together such a board
Okay.
that will henceforth start regulating these type of companies that come up.
Sure.
How far they've gotten in that effort, I don't know, but I was also asked to contribute to coming up with such a board, but it has to be led by the scholars. I think it's early days. Inshallah, we'll have such a board soon.
Sure, inshallah. And lastly, what is your advice to Muslims who want to invest in companies? Is there, I mean, you know the situation. People are, they have very low opinion about Sharia compliant companies because they've been defrauded. So, is there any other options, or where can they invest?
Yeah, I think particularly with regards to Muslims in India, right?
Yes.
It's true. We have very few options to invest here, Sharia compliant options, because the entire thing of putting money in the bank or a government debt, postal saving schemes, putting money in bonds, etc. These aren't Sharia compliant because of the fixed return that you're getting. But that said, there's still quite a few options available. I should also add that we don't have, especially for professionals who want to save on income tax.
Sure.
There are very few. No, pretty much all the options that where you can claim an income tax reduction are not Sharia compliant. So yeah, we have a lot of disadvantages, and Sharia compliant products in terms of Islamic banks are not available. Though a few companies have come up and are offering fixed Sharia compliant fixed return type of investments. You can structure a fixed return Sharia compliant investment. There are ways to do it, but that's another discussion. There's some companies offering Sharia compliant stock market investments, right? But besides that, you have real estate, which is though illiquid, it's a form of investment. You have gold, silver, bullion.
Yes.
You could put money in another business and be a partner in that business. As a Sharik, as a partner. I've mentioned about Mudaraba. That's a very good instrument. Or Aala.
Yes.
You can invest in somebody else's business, and we can incubate businesses in the community. I think that would be a very good option for us. Take risk, get return. But yes, there is a dearth of investment opportunities. But those that are there, and if somebody approaches you with a Sharia compliant investment opportunity, the things to look out for are: number one, see whether the business itself is halal. The underlying activity, is it Sharia compliant? It's not something unethical.
Yes.
And it's transparent. All right. For instance, even look at the promoter's background.
Yes.
Do they have experience in that business? Have they come from a financial background? If they're talking about investments, can they manage your money?
Yes.
Have they worked somewhere in the past doing that?
Yes.
Look at all those things. For instance, a doctor, in a hospital is started by a doctor, right? Pretty much.
Yes.
Or one of the promoters is a doctor.
Yes.
An engineer cannot really run a hospital on his own.
Exactly.
So somebody managing investment should have done that in the past. So look at that, number one.
Yes.
Secondly, look at the contracts. As I said, Islam is muamalat, fiqh muamalat is all about contracts. And see whether the contracts are Sharia compliant. I spoke about the Mudaraba contract or the Wakala contract. Make sure one of those contracts is executed between you and the investment company.
Yes.
Okay. And then in terms of how the returns are distributed, or even before that, make sure that the entire reporting is transparent. Make sure that they report the financial results to you. How your money is being deployed, what are the returns being earned. Everything should be very transparent, as we spoke about earlier. And in terms of the returns you're getting, there are two principles here. One is you can't get a fixed profit. Nobody can guarantee a profit to you. That won't be halal. And they can't even guarantee your principal investment. That also won't be halal, doing so. So what I mean by that, the profit not being guaranteed, that's easy. People understand that.
Yes.
Here, if I tell you that you invest 1 lakh rupees with me, I will guarantee you 5% profit per month. That's not halal.
Yes.
That's the same as giving you a 5% interest.
Sure.
So people understand that. Here, don't confuse this with the profit sharing ratio in Mudaraba, which I spoke about.
Yes.
That is why if there is a profit generated in the business, that is shared between the two parties. Out of 100, you take say 40, I take 60 or whatever we mutually agree. That's different. Here I'm giving you a percentage return on your investment. which is the same as riba.
Sure.
So not only is fixing the profit not correct, but even fixing a range and saying your profit will range from, I've seen a few companies do that. Some of the companies that have closed, 4% to 6% is what you're going to be earning as a profit. That's the same because you're putting a floor, right?
Yes.
The minimum you can get is 4%.
Exactly.
So you're guaranteeing that 4% at least.
Yes.
That also is riba. That's also not halal.
Sure.
So don't fix the profit, okay? And don't guarantee the principal, because as I spoke about the Sharia maxims like al-kharaj bil zaman and al-ghunum bil ghurm, which is, every asset or investment has an associated liability with it, and to get a return from any investment you should share in the risk. So if there's a risk of loss, you can't guarantee the principal because the loss is going to come from the principal. So if I'm going to guarantee your principal, that's also riba, right? That's also not permitted. So make sure these things taken care of, and your investment inshallah will be halal. And always defer to the scholars.
Yes.
In doubt, always get some things checked with them. We are just professionals, in this field, but we all depend on our ulama, scholars to guide us, because Sharia is an ocean, and we just professionals like me, we just scratch the surface of it. But yeah, we also play a role. We understand modern business and finance, and are able to work with the scholars, the ulama, to come up with solutions. And I think a market like India, it's a very interesting market because we've got to come up with creative solutions here in India, because the regulations are not really supportive of opening a full-fledged Islamic bank, for instance. But there's enough there that we can work around and come up with creative solutions for the Indian market. And alhamdulillah, it's been a real pleasure doing that. That's one of the reasons why I came back home from Bangalore. So happy working here and doing. It's my duty to come out and talk about this. I'm happy you were able to.
Sure. Thank you. It was a pleasure talking to you. I think we've covered much of the information that we wanted to discuss. The idea was to give an Islamic perspective to what's going on, and all these companies that have been defrauding people. So there was a need to put an Islamic sense to all these things. So I think we've pretty much achieved that. I hope our audience have taken the information and are more aware than what they were before. And thank you so much for coming in and sparing your time for us.
Thank you, Zakeer. May Allah forgive any shortcomings of what you said. And again, thank you
so much. And thank you so much for watching this. As you know, it was the first ever video interview for the Cognate. I hope you like it. If there is any suggestions or feedback, please comment in the comment box. And please like the video, share it, and subscribe to it. We are on Facebook and YouTube. And thank you so much.